Well, good morning and good Shabbos. This is Valley Beth Shalom Torah study for a Shabbos morning. I am Rabbi Ed Feinstein, safely ensconced in my room here in Valley Beth Shalom in Southern California, joined by my teacher and friend, Rabbi Marc Gellman of South Florida. And we are so glad to share this Shabbos conversation with you again. Marc, good morning and good Shabbos, and a
Good
very
Shabbos, my
almost
dear friend.
good Yontif, almost a good Yontif.
Oh my God, it's in my blood. I'm going up to Long Island to preach on Shabbos, on Rosh Hashanah, and very excited to get COVID behind us. Get it. I know
Oh,
that there's a redoing of a reemergence of it in LA, in California, and elsewhere. And a lot of my friends are sick now, but let's hope we're on the other side of this plague.
so the Torah portion this morning is Ki Tavo el haaretz. Moses says to the people, we're about to enter the land. In the storyline of the Torah, of course, this is a momentous event. We have been in the desert now for 2 generations, for 40 whole years. The generation of the Exodus, with the exception of Moses and Caleb, that generation has died. A new generation has grown up as a desert nomadic warrior people. They are about to step across the boundaries and enter the promised land. It's a promised land none of them have ever seen. Their great-grandparents came from there, and they were fed all the stories that from their parents and their grandparents about someday we will come home, someday we will make it. And Moses says, good, let's talk about what you're going to do when you get there. And the first of the many rules and laws in this tradition of what does it mean to be a citizen of the promised land is a rule about first fruits. Moses says, when you enter the land, you're going to grow your first crops. And when the first fruits of that crop come to a harvest, bring them in a basket to the place I will show you, present them to the priest, and offer this litany. And the litany is the core narrative of the people Israel. It's actually the core narrative of the Haggadah. It's the core narrative of our people. Our ancestors were wandering Arameans. They came from the other side of the river. They found themselves in Egypt because of the starvation of the famine in the land. The Egyptians oppressed them and made them slaves. We cried out to the God of our ancestors. God redeemed us with might and with power, brought us across this wilderness, planted us in this promised land, and that's why I bring you these first fruits. That is a remarkable ritual. It is a remarkable sentiment. The story isn't we are the most powerful people in the world and we came and conquered this land. It's not about our power. It's about the grace of God who keeps his promise. God keeps God's promises to our ancestors. It is an expression of gratitude,
Yes,
not overwhelming power and militarism or imperialism. It's a deep expression, frankly, of humility. Without divine help, we could have never done this. And the blessings of life have been given to us as a gift. And so I bring a piece of that gift back to God, these first fruits, which in anyone's garden is the most precious, the sweetest of the fruit and the sweetest of the produce. I bring it back as a gesture of gratitude. Marc, why this gesture? Why this narrative? Why this ritual?
all right. Well, there's 2 sides to this. Depends on what side of the bed you got up this morning. I have 2 sides of the bed, and the one side is I wake up grateful for God's blessings and serene and at peace in the world. And then the other days, which is a lot of the days, I wake up and I have a cynical side to me. And that cynical side and the grateful side are both in this mitzvah. So let's start with the cynical side. The cynical side is this was a 10% vigorish on the top of everything for the priests. These were the first iterations of temple dues. This is how the priests lived. This was their deal. We don't own land. We don't farm the land. but we get 10% of everything in the gross domestic product of ancient Israel, which is a very, very good deal. And that was how they got supported. And it's obvious, since they were the ones who redacted the Torah, that every single law which teaches the people to support the priests and the priesthood with money, and they didn't have money, but with contributions in kind, would be a very important part of the Torah, and it is. So the first thing is, this is how the priests made their living. And it's not a high spiritual deal. In fact, you could make the case that it was an exploitation of the people, because 10% is a big chunk to pay to the priesthood just because they're priests. The second part, my grateful part, my tender part, the part that I want to get out of bed every single day, but don't always succeed. That part says, look, there's only two ways to look at what you have. One is, it's all mine, I deserve it, I earned it, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. And the other is, everything I have is a gift from God. Those are the only two ways. Our country was founded by philosophers, British empiricists, Locke, Bentham, Hume, and they had this first view. Everything you own is yours. It's individuals who have rights, and these rights protect you against the hostile incursions of your neighbor. Judaism is a totally different idea. Our idea is, you own nothing. Kol haaretz li, the whole earth is mine, God says. You own nothing. Everything you have is a gift from God. Well, if you're given a gift, what's the right thing to do? The right thing to do is to be grateful and to say thank you. Well, God is invisible, so how do you say thank you? You say thank you by giving contributions to God's representatives here on earth. It's the same as the synagogue. And that's how we are able to support Jewish life. It really gripes me when I see people say, oh, no, it's so expensive to be Jewish and this and this. I said, do you know how much money you spend on restaurants in a year? Do you know how much money you spend on having your nails done? I mean, what we're talking about here is gratitude to God by supporting religious institutions here on earth. And I think before the holidays and before all the highfalutin ideas that get thrown around, we have to get to the basis of the fact here that these holidays remind us that we are a chosen people, we are God's people, and we have a duty to live not just a believing life, but a sacrificial life.
So let's talk about sacrificial life. First of all, the attitude that you adduced, the attitude that you suggested. I don't own my own property, or I don't own it free and clear. Let's say there's different versions of this. I mean, you could see
it's a gift.
The radical version is actually here in Torah, as you said, Kol haaretz li, God owns everything. And of course, the most radical expression of that, we all know this, is that when a person dies, there are certain rules about how the body is to be buried. And you're not allowed to kill yourself. You have to live in a town where there's a doctor. Certain acts of your own body are not permitted because you only borrow your body. It's part of the lease arrangement for physicality in this universe. I think in terms of property, the most wonderful chapter, the most wonderful statement is the one in Deuteronomy 24, which says that when you harvest the field or the vineyard or the orchard, you leave behind the gleanings. That you're allowed to go over your field once. Anything that you don't pick up on that first pass through, anything that isn't ripe on that day, anything that you can't reach with your reaping machine or your reapers, stays in the field. And then according to the tradition, the landowner must vacate the area, and the poor come and they take what's left. And it's not charity, it's property law.
Yeah.
It's you don't own it. What you own is the right to a first pass through the field. Now that's completely contrary to our liberal American idea that it's my field, it's my vineyard, I farmed it, I own it, right? The idea that it's not yours, that God gives it to you as a gift, and it comes with strings attached because you are part of a community and responsible for that community far more than you can imagine. And besides that, I think it's really trying to, and maybe this is my modern overlay, and I completely understand this is eisegesis more than exegesis. It's the interpretation I impose. It's trying to undo that sense in which I am defined by my property, that I am what I owe, or as Feuerbach put it, you are what you eat. That my role in the economy is my value in the world. And those of us who have more are worth more, and those of us who have less are worth less. And to try to decouple your humanity from your property, and understand that property is instrumental. It's there to be enjoyed and to be used, and it supports you, and it's, nothing wrong with owning property, but it doesn't define your worth as a human being. I think it's a very radical and some ways a very beautiful idea.
Yeah. Let me tell you about the best thing I ever did as a rabbi. I think the best thing I ever did, or at least today, my remembrance, and the winner today in my remembrance of my active life as a rabbi, was to create the gleaning, the Temple Beth Torah gleaning every year, because we were on Long Island and there were a lot of picket farms and a lot of farms that hadn't sold out to developers yet, or a few of them. We would go, and at the end of the harvest season, around high holidays, we found a few farmers who would let us go into the fields. And we would glean in the fields exactly in the fulfillment of the biblical commandment. And we picked tomatoes and green beans and eggplants, whatever you had in the field. And we would package it up and give it to the food banks on Long Island. And over the years, we donated tons and tons of produce to the food banks, and children loved it and adults loved it. There was something profound about this idea of going into the fields, picking food for the poor. It's so simple and it's so powerful. And that idea that we don't own everything is so liberating.
Mm-hmm.
It changes you. It changes how you think about people. Just think about your conversations with other people, how often we drift into the noxious and embarrassing, I think degrading conversations of how much he works for so-and-so, she works for so-and-so, how much he got more money than you can imagine. We talk about money and success that way, rather than, this guy is so nice, or she's so nice, she always helps people, she's always talking to people. In other words, rather than looking at qualities that have no financial overlay when we are in casual conversation, quite often we talk about the person's job or a person's income as if that defined them. So it's a huge liberation to break out of that and to say, no, my identity is I'm a creature made in the image of God, and I'm here to give thanks to God for all my blessings. It's pretty much that simple, Ed.
So let's talk about, you've talked many times on our broadcast about sacrificial Judaism.
Yes.
And here we have one of the most wonderful examples of that. Right after this law of bringing the first fruits is the law of the Misa, the Maaser, a tithe, that you take a tithe, the 10% of your produce, of your income, of your harvest, and you bring it to the community. It's your temple dues, it's your support for the collective.
Yeah.
Today, we would talk about supporting the community through temple dues, but we'd also talk about what the American idea of charity, which of course is somewhat different because charity is a Christian idea that when my heart moves me, I give. And the Jewish idea is heart or not, you give because the community needs you. So talk to us. There's a common complaint that I hear. Maybe you heard it too. Older members of my community come to me sometimes too frequently and tell me that the young don't know how to give, that they haven't been raised in a culture of giving, that getting them to give is very difficult. It's not that they don't have. God knows Starbucks is full of younger folks buying $4 or $5 frappuccinos,
Yeah.
but they don't. But no one's taught them an ethic of giving, a pattern of giving, a rhythm of giving. The Torah wants to start this. The Torah says you're going to come into the land, you're going to bring the first fruits, and then you're going to bring 10%, which is a pattern. It becomes a habit, as it were. Talk to me about giving.
Yeah. Well, so one day when I was studying in Mir Yeshiva, I overheard a conversation, and one guy says to the other, one Bocher says, "Do you meiser yourself?" "Oh yeah, I meiser. Yeah, I meiser myself. Do you meiser? Do you think so and so meisers himself?" And that's the way they would talk about it, to meiser yourself, which is from the Maaser, means do you give away 10% of your income? So to all our dear viewers and students, and let me ask you, as the high holidays approaches, that you put a point on this spear and that you think about something that might cut a little bit into you and expose some level of selfishness or hypocrisy. And that is this question: how much of your income do you give away? Not do you give away, because everyone gives something to something, I think. The question is, how much do you give away? And what is the proper amount? Meaning, what percentage of your total income before tax gross, your gross, what percentage is a reasonable percentage to give away?
And where do you give it?
That's the second question.
Right.
That's the second question. And there are great difficulties. Tommy and I would mention this often in our speeches. There's great difficulties in making money, but there's also great difficulties, sometimes greater difficulties, in giving away money properly. And let's just finish the first part, which is how much should you give away? Do you realize that we are the heirs to a rabbinic tradition that actually made a ruling, a takana, in Europe, that you couldn't give away more than a third of your income? Now, just think about that. They actually had to tell Jews, called Balei Tzedakah, the Jews who were really dedicated to giving away money, they had to tell them, you can't give away more than a third of your income because you have family needs. That is amazingly wonderful to have that in your tradition.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at your income and if it's less than 10%, you might want to consider a gift that, unlike Cain's gift, which was just whatever was in the fields, was more like Abel's gift, which was the firstlings, the finest firstlings of the flock. Give away more than you give away. The second is learn how to evaluate the charities you're looking at. There are places that review charities online. Charity Navigator is a good one. Give.com is a, they evaluate the charities and they evaluate how much the charity takes for its overhead. Now, it's entirely legitimate for very good charities to take money from you and use some of it for paying the lighting bill and the salaries and whatever they have to pay for it to stay in business, to do their good work. But that amount has to be, according to Charity Navigator, less than 30%. So if a charity is giving away 70%, okay. If it's giving away 50%,
right,
it's using too much for its overhead. And you can check this out. And if the charity you're looking at isn't ranked or rated on these sites, then you should know that they have decided not to be ranked, and that's a negative, a big negative. Another test that I use of giving away to charities is highly advertised charities are, for me, always suspect. If you see a charity on TV and they got a big ad in the Super Bowl, or they got a big ad on TV and it's always coming up, and the ad, it's asking you to give a this and this, that's an expensive thing to do. Now, I'm not saying it proves that they're corrupt. I'm not saying they're corrupt either. They may do very good work, and they may do it in a very mindful way. But it's a big red flag, right, because it's a little too slick. And now, what are some of the great charities? Some of the great charities are, if you're Catholic Charities is always up in the top 5. They take very little to do their good work. The UJA is a wonderful, and Federation, a wonderful charity, because they have a lot of volunteers and give away a lot of their money. Their overhead is very low. Synagogues are extremely frugal and good, and always good. But some charities, my final word about charities is try to have a charity portfolio. We did this every Yontif with our family. Mm-hmm. We would talk to the kids, say, okay, where are we going to give away money this year? And each person in our family had a vote. Mm. And that's how we got into raising guide dogs for the blind. Betty had this idea and everyone loved it. And so we supported the Guide Dog Foundation of Smithtown on Long Island, and we became puppy walkers. But everyone in our family had a vote, and every year we would divide up the money we would put in on Shabbos plus our contributions, and everyone would decide where to give it. And if you don't have children, that's fine, but everyone talks about their stock portfolio. Uh-huh. And if you ask people, what are you invested in? Most people can tell you what they're invested in.
Right.
You ask them, what's your charity portfolio?
That's a beautiful idea.
You're an idiot. What's that? I never heard of that.
Yeah, but the thing that makes it so wonderful that you talked about is you did it as a family.
Yes.
See, the problem is now, when I give charity, I do it online. Like, I'm sitting at my computer, and either things come up, or I have a schedule for myself, and I do 4 clicks. Either I use PayPal or my credit card or my bank. My kids don't see me doing it.
That's a problem.
The children have to see it. They have to feel like they're invested in it. They're involved in it. So the idea that you sat down, you and Betty and the kids, and together decided on charities, and then, show them that, we don't write checks anymore, but show them that you do it, and involve them. One of the things I've told folks is, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pick a charity that you value, and I want you to make a small contribution. But when it asks who should the acknowledgement go to, put your grandchild's name in there. So they'll get all the response, and then talk to the kid about any amount you give to this charity, I'll match. And you or ask a child, a bar mitzvah kid. I ask them all the time, choose a charity and have a corner of your bedroom, which is your tzedakah corner, and put the stuff, the letters and the brochures they're going to send you, put it up there. In addition to, your Taylor Swift posters, and your Patrick Mahomes posters, have something from the charity that you're touching the world. You're using money to touch the world. What could be better than that?
Yes. And one other thing I would suggest to give that experiential power to the act of tzedakah is to take your kids, particularly when they're younger and around bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah age, particularly then, take them to a soup kitchen with you.
Wow. Yeah.
Go and serve lunch on a regular basis at a local soup kitchen.
Right.
The soup kitchen needs volunteers, and for them to stand in a line and give food to people who are living in their cars, or who don't even have a car, who are living on the street, changes them forever. I took a kid who was all depressed about something or other, and, in his privileged life. And I took him to a soup kitchen, and we're standing behind the thing. And one of the things of the dessert was a happy birthday cake that a local baker had donated to us because he didn't sell it. And a little girl comes through and looks at the cake and says, "How did you know that today was my birthday?" And she was living in a car with her brother and her mother. And there it was, this kid, this privileged kid, tears coming down his face, saying, this girl never had a birthday party, never had a birthday gift. And all of a sudden she goes into a soup kitchen and there's a happy birthday cake. It was a gift from God. It was just a gift from God. And so those are the kinds of experiences that you can build into your kid.
Right. Just to show the kids that the whole world doesn't live like we do. And what's wonderful is because our kids do that here, and I always interview them when they come back. And one of the things that surprises them is that the poor and the homeless, the unhoused, are not Martians. They look just like us. They're men and women who are down on their luck. They're families that are living out of their cars, but they look like they're us. They're human beings who are just four catastrophes away from where we are, or less. And the kids will come back and say, I just never thought of these people as people because they're invisible. Because we've rendered a whole class of human beings invisible. And it's their invisibility that keeps us from reaching out and doing something. So it's a profound idea. One last idea from the Parsha. You ready?
Yeah.
One of the reasons at the end of the Parsha come curses and blessings.
Oh, please.
They're scary.
I don't even want to.
I want one. No. There's one line from it that you do enjoy, which is God said, "I'll curse you if you haven't served me with joy." If you haven't served B'simcha and with Lev Tov, if you haven't brought your happiness to religion, if religion becomes morbid, if it becomes heavy, there have to be, of course, serious moments in religious life. But the idea that one of the reasons you get cursed is that you forget to sing. And you forget that gratitude must come with an open and light heart. And that religion can be celebrated with a sense of joy, which is one of my shticks over the years, because I get it. I was raised like probably you were at a Hebrew school where I learned the names of all the oppressors and all the persecutors, and we knew the names of it was like Tisha B'Av all year long. It took a while for me to discover how much joy there is in Jewish life. Simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of doing a mitzvah, simcha of the community, this idea that part of this faith is a sense of walking the world with a heart full of joy, and that's something that God commands in this Torah portion.
Yep.
So, what's the most joyful moment of a Jewish year? What's the most joyful part of a Jewish life? What's the joy that you teach?
That's easy. Simchas Torah, because after that, you've done all your sermons for high holidays and you could dance, and it's the rabbi's most joyous time of the year.
So let's give a commandment to all of our friends and listeners. If you go to Yom Kippur, which you should, and you fast, and you beat your chest for your sins, and you pray endlessly in morbid melodies, you must come back a week and a half later for Simchas Torah.
You must.
Because it's the opposite. It's a day of feasting, not fasting. It's a day of joy, not solemnity. And and on Yom Kippur, the Torah is so heavy. Religion is so heavy. On Simchas Torah, we dance with the Torah. And you have to do that. And you have to show your families that we do that. You have to show that we are a people, that the upshot of faith, the gift of faith, is not just the deep responsibilities that we carry, but a sense of joy. That's such an important part of Jewish life. And it's been missed too often. I once said, after the Holocaust, I think we should make Purim and Simchas Torah the high holidays. I'd like to see the shul packed full on those 2 days.
I agree.
Because we've had enough morbidity. It's time for joy. Marc, I wish you a good Shabbos, a good
Shabbos,
week.
Eddie.
Take good care, and to everyone who's listening, a Shabbat Shalom and a very, very pleasant week. Next week, we're going to be deep in the preparations for the holidays, so we'll start talking about that. Very good Shabbos to everyone.